causes of body dysmorphia disorder are unclear, but doctors believe that a certain biological and environmental factor may lead to its development. That includes a person's genetic disposition, the way that they were born. Neurobiological factors such as malfunctioning of serotonin in the brain, basically you were born that way. Personality traits you're born with. And life experiences. For example, child maltreatment, sexual trauma, or peer abuse. So, biochemical, genetic, and environmental factors. If you are suffering from BDD, 2 out of the 3 reasons for you being unhappy with who you think you are, it's not your fault. But you can get back the confidence you never knew you lost with altered state therapy. Body dysmorphia was considered rare until around 1981, and they found that the thought of being ugly is intrinsic in all of us. But when it occupies someone's attention over and over in the same 24-hour period, and then aggressively returns to torture you some more, refusing to stop no matter what you try to do or think about, then causes you anxiety, distress, and anguish, then this mental activity has gone beyond the bounds of normal and into the realm of psychopathology. Today the disorder affects about 400,000 people in Canada and is more prevalent than schizophrenia or any sort of anxiety or anorexia nervosa. A lot of the side effects that cause BDD are bullying as a kid, teasing, abuse, child neglect. There's a family history of OCD, low self-esteem, critical parents, experience of traumatic events at a young age, a lot of societal pressures, and also, plain out could be your personality type. If you have BDD, you more than likely experience intrusive and negative thoughts about probably one specific area of your body, or maybe several areas of your body that you probably think are out of proportion or too big or too small, disfigured, maybe lacking symmetry. If you think you have a problem, think about these questions, okay? Do you obsessively check your appearance in mirrors or avoid mirrors completely? If you're a woman, do you use heavy makeup and try to hide the areas that you're concerned about? Do you change your posture or wear heavy clothes to disguise your shape? Are you seeking constant reassurance about your appearance? And maybe you're exercising excessively and often targeting the area that you're concerned about most. Do you do frequent body checks with your fingers or pick your skin to make it smooth? Maybe you're an excessive tanner or using tanning products, or you're frequently weighing yourself. More BDD symptoms are maybe you brush your hair or style your hair obsessively, or constantly compare yourself with models on TV or in magazines, or even people on the street. Are you constantly seeking cosmetic surgery or any other types of medical treatment to change that area of your concern? If you answer to yes, or you can relate to any of those, then you may be living with BDD. Body dysmorphic disorder is a preoccupation with an imagined defect in appearance, or, excessive concern with a slight physical anomaly. The scary thing is, if you go and tell your doctor that you may have BDD, they'll probably prescribe you a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an SSRI. It's a medication, fluoxetine being the most common. And they'll give that to you with no questions asked. The fact that they don't really know how to deal with the mental illness that is BDD tells us that all the meds are probably just job validation for the doctors as usual. The meds are just ways to keep us coming back for more help. And we all become experimental patients with no real possibility of honestly, truly conquering your identity crisis, which is what you're going through. One thing that is proving more true all the time is that BDD is turning out to be a genetic issue, meaning you inherit it from somewhere down the family tree. There's some evidence that suggests that BDD is more common in people whose family members have actually had BDD. But it's difficult to know whether symptoms such as, believing that you're disfigured or frequently checking in mirrors is inherited from your parents' genes or picked up from their behavior. They don't know. I always ask any client that I'm dealing with, did you watch your mother stress in the mirror or change 3 times before leaving? Or even refuse to go out when she wasn't looking or feeling beautiful? Maybe your parents frowned on nudity or constantly told you to lose weight or be more like a sibling or, one of the other parents. Maybe you came from a long line of gymnasts and models and actors and athletes or other ego-driven identities that taught you that you're just not good enough being you. All right, so just so this is perfectly clear, BDD, body dysmorphic disorder, is a mental illness, and people who have this illness constantly worry about the way they look. They may believe an inconspicuous or non-existent physical attribute is a serious defect. Just so you know, BDD is relatively common and has been well defined by the mental health community. However, we're just dipping our toe into the water, connecting BDD and past trauma. But there is a growing body of research worldwide discovering that 1,000,000% that trauma is strongly associated with the development of BDD. So what does it feel like? Well, BDD can manifest as stress and depression, anxiety, restlessness, or even unhappiness. And it might feel like anger or sadness or, feeling slighted or negative about your body. Or like there are parts of you that are just missing. I had a client recently who's a guy, and he was 30 years old, emaciated and gaunt in his face and his arms, and we're going to call him Phil, just to be considerate to him. Okay, so Phil was unemployed and single, and he had never had a significant romantic relationship, mainly due to the fact he was constantly, avoiding being social and being in social interactions, and is currently still struggling with depression as a result of his feeling of being ugly, so he thought, ever since he was a kid. Phil came from a really well-off family. Mother was a so-called trophy wife, as he says, and she had a long history of plastic surgery. And as he was growing up in that house, he saw that all the time, and he heard about imperfections, and that led him to getting a nose job at around age 17. He has a long history of visits to plastic surgeons. Now 10 years later, he's 26, and he's been a dermatologist for treatments, but what nobody in his life told him was that his original appearance was normal. No one ever told him just to be himself, to love himself. Phil spent up to 4 hours every day checking his appearance in the mirror. He didn't appear to have a primary depression, but there was a ton of ritualistic behavior, such as spending a lot of hours in front of the mirror, looking at himself and judging himself, despite the fact that he knew doing this caused him further stress. He tried 2 different methods of therapy to get better before he came to altered state therapy. He did cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and he was on medication combined with the CBD, but nothing worked. And then he found me. We used a weekly dose of psilocybin along with regimented truth therapy, making him say the truth, but what he sees, and just dispelling all of those thoughts. The psilocybin opened the door for him to be able to take suggestion, positive suggestion, and it brought out the willingness to change inside of him, or at least, it entertained an alternative option. Let's say that. The psychedelic drug itself will not help you cope or get rid of the BDD, but what it will help you do is motivate and inspire you to do the hard work required to live with the illness and find success within the chaos. With Phil, we address certain BDD symptoms by identifying the problem, then creating exercises that help him either learn or conquer the thinking behind the sickness. Does that make sense? Right? So we looked at what his thoughts were, and then we created scenarios to dispel those thoughts. So we helped Phil with his preoccupation with flaws, right? He wasn't able to understand he wasn't alone in the way he thought. So we introduced him to confident people that looked like him, who had also struggled with these feelings of inadequacy, right? He saw that other self-views were just in their heads, and he also met people that were similar to him that used psilocybin to get over everything. We helped him with his paranoia about his appearance, getting him into exercise. He was worried always that people were judging him, so we put him in a group session and had everybody talk about first impressions, and he was surprised to hear that everybody's first impressions of him were great. They were really good. He was always trying to hide his imperfections. So we made Phil spend $500 on clothing. We took him to a store in Vancouver where they dressed him to his body and to his style, got him a haircut, got his eyebrows done. We tried to show him that he was focusing so much on imperfections when he had so many great things that he could focus on instead, and he started doing that. He constantly compared himself to others, so we made him drop idols and get rid of people that he compared himself to. And also, taking him out to uncomfortable situations with girls, pub nights, trivia nights. Go there and drink and eat and talk to people. We were able to, talk to other people out in public forums who had mental illnesses and how they dealt with them. So just Phil hearing the stories of overcoming all these thoughts and these negative self-perceptions really helped him in his therapy. He also had a distorted perception of his appearance, and he was undergoing frequent cosmetic surgeries when we first started meeting him, and he has stopped that negative self-image he's working on. But he stopped thinking of Botox and getting Botox and looking at tattoos. He always thought that tattoos made him look tougher and cooler, but it didn't. He was just scarring himself. There's a lot of things we worked on with Phil, and all that we've learned from this is that treatment for body dysmorphic disorder includes both individual and group therapy, as well as psilocybin, either doing a macro dose or a micro dose on a regular basis. If your symptoms are milder, they may improve from either treatment alone, but therapy and psilocybin and microdosing works together for faster results. And you can walk out of there within 2 or 3 sessions feeling fantastic and feeling positive and loving yourself. When you use psilocybin and therapy together, you're basically opening the door to developing new tools against your thoughts. You're outthinking your brain. You can overcome these thoughts that create this negative self-image of yourself. There's an internal peace inside of you. It's possible. The love you need has always been a part of you. You just haven't seen it. If you're suffering from BDD or think you may be, please contact me. I'll help you and create a specialized program that'll help you start seeing yourself who you truly are, a wonderful piece of this existence. Today on this episode, we interviewed Dana Larsen down at the Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary in Vancouver. Dana is a Canadian author and a big-time philanthropist and activist for cannabis and all other drug reform. Dana currently operates businesses and nonprofit societies in Vancouver, including the one we're filming at today, which was the Medicinal Mushroom Dispensary, the Cocoa Leaf Cafe. We spoke about the importance of the emerging psilocybin treatments and just how psilocybin treatment will change the mindsets of those suffering from mental illness and depression, but also how it will bring us closer to the one relationship that we seem to avoid, and that's that relationship with ourselves.
So there is a movement happening in Vancouver and all across the world. Mushrooms and psychedelics are becoming the go-to substance to help people with depression, any kind of sadness, lack of motivation, trauma from the past. Today we're at the Cocoa Leaf Cafe and we're going to talk to the man in Vancouver. This is the guy, Dana Larsen, that started the movement back in the day 30 years ago and has continued to carry the torch on legalizing drugs right here in Canada. And today we're going to have a quick interview with him inside of his thing, but not after I finish my Cocoa Leaf coffee. All right, so if you've never had a Cocoa Leaf coffee, you have the chance now in Vancouver, British Columbia. Right here at the Cocoa Leaf Cafe in downtown Vancouver, you can get a Cocoa Leaf coffee straight from Peru. or Bolivia, wherever it's coming from. But it's a great tasting coffee, and it's all just part of Dana Larsen's plan in legalizing drugs here in Canada and the Lower Mainland. And today we're going to have a conversation with him inside about psychedelics and the future of mushrooms in our society. With it?
Yeah, I'm 50 and I started doing this kind of stuff when I was 18, 19. I started writing letters to the government about drug policy and that. And it's been kind of a life's mission for me, and it's taken a lot of time, but I think we've made a lot of progress.
What keeps you going, man? Because I've seen you in the paper, I've seen you on the news, I've heard from people both pro and against everything you do. How do you stay resilient?
You know, I do get some negative feedback, but not that much. Like most people are telling me good things and say, well, I'm doing the right thing. And to me, it's like this is a very important issue. It's one that I enjoy working on, right? So I have fun doing this kind of stuff. And I feel I'm also helping people and making the world a better place and all that kind of good karma stuff. So there's been definitely challenging times over the years where you're kind of like, oh, what am I doing? What have I got into? But I'm really happy with how this movement has gone and this crusade and my career so far and stuff. And I feel we got a lot to do still, right? In a way, we're just getting started. You know, cannabis was just like one small part of a much bigger thing. And that's what we're doing here, is really expanding it beyond cannabis to talk about all the other plants and drugs. And really the whole war on drugs needs to end.
What do kids, like my cameraman, Rowan's age 25, what do they have to know about everything that you've been doing over the last 30 years? And what can they expect in the future?
Well, I think that it's the civil disobedience part that's really accomplished a lot. You know, I've done a lot of different stuff and I've worked politically and done things with the NDP, but the most successful aspect, I think, has been opening places like this, opening cannabis dispensaries. We started with bong shops and seed banks back in the day, you know, and in the mid 90s, right? That was bongs and pipes were illegal. People would get busted in Vancouver for selling a hookah or a bong, right? In the 90s, you know, and that's really where it started. And this idea of overgrowing the government, openly defying these laws in a real transparent way. It's easier some parts of the country than others, that's for sure, right? But finding the right battles and kind of moving incrementally. We got bongs and pipes and seeds, and then it was medical cannabis, and then it was cannabis for everybody, and then we had full legalization, and now I think it's going to be psychedelics following a similar kind of path. And so a place like this, a mushroom dispensary, we do more than that here, but that's a big part of it. I think we're going to see more of these kind of places opening up in Vancouver and across Canada. And I think that the law changed in Canada because we had everybody defying it already anyways. You needed hundreds of shops across the country openly selling marijuana before they would legalize it, right? Things go you think they legalize it first, and then, no, it's the opposite direction, right? You have to make the reality happen, and then eventually the authorities will kind of begrudgingly accept that reality and even maybe try to, it's out of control. There's hundreds of shops everywhere. We got to pass some laws to try to control it, right? And so it becomes a whole different conversation. And I think we're going to see that with psychedelics. And I hope with like opiates and other things, I'd love to see like a heroin compassion club of some kind opening in Vancouver as well, you know, and that might come together too.
What do people have to know about psychedelics? Like, what's the most important thing that you've discovered over time?
Yeah, I think that psychedelics are going to be a huge thing, especially microdosing, you know, and there's definitely great benefits from taking a larger dosage and that kind of experience. You can get epiphanies and understand yourself better. And, you know, some people are dealing with more trauma and more issues than others. We've all got stuff that we're working on and dealing with. And I think that in the right context, psychedelics can be great for that kind of thing. But I think that microdosing especially is going to become very popular. It's kind of like the CBD of psychedelics, where you can get a lot of the medical benefits, but some people are very afraid of getting high on marijuana and it's going to be unpleasant, or they just don't want to lose control, or they're nervous, but they'll take CBD and it has a lot of benefits. And I think with psychedelics that a lot of people are going to start microdosing. I'm seeing it expanding a lot already. We talk to a lot of first timers here at our cafe and also for our mail order service as well. And people report really amazing benefits. And I find that like with antidepressants, people who take antidepressants, they can be helpful, but they tend more to like dampen down all your emotions. So you don't feel the negative things so much, but you also don't feel as much joy in your life either. And that everything just kind of becomes like a gray. And the mushrooms and the psychedelics, they help you to integrate your trauma and kind of get past it and not try to dampen it down, but to make it part of who you are. But you also, the positive things are there too. And like, you can paint with other colors. You still got that gray color in your palette maybe, but you've got other things there as well. And so it doesn't dominate, and you can kind of move past and integrate it. So I feel it's more of a healing experience, and that the antidepressants, I get a lot of customers who are on antidepressants, don't want to be on them anymore. And I find that's it's just a different approach. And I think ultimately a healthier and better one. And unlike antidepressants, you don't keep microdosing forever, right? Usually people, I tell them, give it a few weeks or a few months, and sometimes it takes longer than others, but generally people do not microdose regularly twice a week for their whole life, right? They might do it for a few months, then maybe you just take it once in a while, maybe seasonally or on occasion, but it's a healing process that really lets you move past things. And I think that's what makes it unique. A lot of other stuff is designed to be used all the time, which is more profitable. Selling someone a pill they got to take every day for years. Microdosing and mushrooms, really, it's more of an experience you go through, and then maybe you go through it occasionally as a reminder, but you don't need to keep going through it again. You learn it, it gives you healing, and then you can move on.
Yeah, that's really great advice. That's exactly how I think. It's not a everyday thing. This is a very a reparable drug. Like, it will repair a lot of things that are going wrong in your life. Right?
And you can't really take psychedelics every day because you get tolerance very rapidly, right? So even with the microdosing, you can maybe do it 2 days in a row, but we tell people take 2 days between doses ideally, and that's a pretty common protocol. And there's some flexibility there, but you need a couple of day breaks here and there to reset your tolerance. So in a way, they're sort of anti-addictive. You can't just pop them all the time. They stop working, right? And so I think that's a good thing about them, that they don't lend themselves to overuse and are kind of self-modulating in how they work.
All right. So what do you think about your personal opinion on mainstream culture now, saying that they've had these spiritual awakenings and they're all woke, this woke culture because of psychedelics? Is that real?
Yeah, I think it can sound pretentious, sometimes, but I do think it's a real experience that can be hard to put into words, right? But I think it's a very healing experience for a lot of people. I think there's maybe some cultural imperialism and some Western aspect to it it becomes commercialized, right? It's a product we can sell. We'll take you on a tour. We'll charge you a couple $1,000s. Here's our shaman, and we'll do this and that. And so I think that's maybe kind of takes away from that. But it's good to have someone to help guide you through it. And there isn't really any sort of accredited system, and there's a lot of great shamanistic type people out there, and also anybody can call themselves that, and there's a lot of money to be made, and it's a kind of a self-regulating thing. And in the psychedelic therapy world in general, there have been also sexual misconduct. People you're in a very vulnerable state when you're taking these things, and you can feel sexual and horny, and you need to be able to and if you're dealing with, and that happens in other areas of therapy too. It's not unique to psychedelics in any way, right? Or that they're more, I'm not sure if it's more likely or anything. I don't think so, but it's also a developing field, and there isn't the same kind of oversight and bodies and official stamp that can be taken away from you if you do something. And so I think we need some of that stuff around it, but you got to be careful about that, because it is also something that it is also part of Indigenous traditions in a lot of ways, and it's not something that you necessarily want to impose all this Western stuff on, right? So there's a tension there. I'm not sure how to resolve that, but I do think that the experience is a valid experience, and even if you're, a movie star or a rich person or somebody, I remember Will Smith and Chris Rock and these guys having ayahuasca experiences, and I think that's good. And they got stuff to deal with too, right? It's not easy maybe it's easier being a millionaire than being a poor person, but you got your own weird challenges and psychological issues and things you're dealing with, right? And if that helps mainstream it so that other people feel more confident, I heard Will Smith did it, maybe you can help me with my issues. And I think that's a good thing.
Have you tried any of the other psychedelics? Have you done the whole rainbow of psychedelics? Or
Yeah, pretty much. Definitely mushrooms. I've tried ayahuasca several times. And I used to do a lot of LSD when I was younger. I still do it occasionally. It just takes up a lot of time doing an LSD trip. But there's a group in Vancouver, the Santo Daime Church, which is an ayahuasca-based church, and they do a good ceremony, and I like the ceremony and how they do it, and you're wearing white and you're singing hymns in Portuguese, and so I might come from, for me, the ayahuasca has always been in that kind of context. And you do it over a 2-day period. You do it twice. You do it around noon and then again around 4 o'clock both days. So you have 4 drinks over a 2-day period, right? And they do it a certain way. And I'm not sure that's the best way or not, but it's the one that's a thing. And I have never taken other things like that. Mushrooms, never done it in like a group experience. And it's definitely different when you're doing it in a group and you're all kind of there intentionally and you're all like peaking at the same moment. And yeah, and maybe it's not necessarily better or worse, I would say, but it's a different kind of experience than doing it by yourself or with a small group of people in a different way. So yeah, and I've that's been my experience. Those kind of shamanistic kind of one with somebody there leading the group like that.
It's interesting. Oh yeah, I've never done the ayahuasca. I've heard about. What, in your opinion, after trying all of this, what do you think is the most effective? Like when I say effective, I mean like, what do you think is going to be the thing that will change people the most once it becomes all legalized?
I mean, partly it's about dosage too, right? So like, I mean, when I'm on an ayahuasca trip, I'm like, this is the ultimate thing, really. I find it's the most potent, but that's because I don't normally, I do mushrooms. I don't seek out, I'm not like do a Voyager where I'm taking 10 grams at a time, right? I'll do a couple of grams, like a reasonable dose, right? But I mean, I've had pretty profound experiences on all things. And I think that, it's hard to say really, but the ayahuasca experience, maybe because it's in a group, ayahuasca also, you very much feel like you're encountering other intelligent beings, right? Really? Like you feel like whether it's an angel or a spirit or an elf or the beings behind reality or however you interpret that, or if it's your own brain doing stuff, but you definitely feel like you're communicating with another spiritual force that is telling you stuff. And I've never had that experience on LSD or mushrooms. I might have insights and epiphanies and healing moments and forgiveness and those kind of things, but I don't feel like I'm talking to somebody that isn't physically manifested, right? And you definitely get that feeling from ayahuasca. So that makes it kind of unique that you're communicating with like with God or so whatever you want to call it. In the Santo Daime Church, they kind of have a Catholic kind of overlay. So they talk about Jesus, but they don't use the Bible. It's more like an archetype of a healing force than it is like, yeah. And because it's so, they have some dogma, but a lot of these things are very internal experiences. So it's more about your experience with this substance or with that spiritual force than it is about, we got a bunch of rules about how many this and how many angels there are and all the levels and what you have to do to go to heaven or hell. Or, a lot of religions are really hooked up on a lot of that kind of stuff, right? And so I think that the psychedelic experience is more about, here's a substance that can be beneficial and you can interpret it kind of how you want, right? I'm here to guide you through this experience or to help you make sense of it, but it's your experience ultimately, right? And there's not one right way to do it.
Yeah, and you don't have to go all the way down to Costa Rica to do it, so it's just down the street.
So, I mean, I think there's benefits to that, and to each their own. I'm not really sure what the right way is, but I just know that these things bring a lot of benefits and that they should be more widely available. But I also understand issues around like the appropriation of culture and that. And I think there's got to be a way of matching both those things together. Yeah. It was really medical marijuana that led us into legalization, right? Because it changes the perception from some hedonist or a dirty hippie smoking some weed or whatever to like grandma using it or a veteran using it or somebody, or a child using it for their epilepsy. It changes the whole dynamic of what that substance is. Then you start thinking, well, if it helps this kid with their epilepsy and it helps grandma with their arthritis, maybe it's not so bad for other people too. And sort of then I think that becomes the acceptance. And I think with psychedelics, the benefits of PTSD and of people who aren't seen as your typical raver or hippie or people that should have a right for it too, right? But maybe you're easier to categorize and to dismiss as not being a serious person and just being a hedonist or just saying stuff, right? But when it's someone who's more respectable or has got a different status, then it becomes more acceptable, right? And so I think that that's part of the change. And I think that the war on drugs also is just being seen more and more as a total failure and like totally based in racism and ignorance and really an artifact of the past that needs to be let go of. and we're trying to move past as a society and deal with a lot of other racial and sexual issues, and we've got this one drug war thing that's still like stuck in there, and we're still dealing with other issues, but homosexuality and LGBT community, they got a lot of issues, but being criminalized by Western governments isn't one of them anymore. And most governments try to bend over backwards to like show their support for that community. Definitely face stigma in other countries, definitely face stigma still from individuals and groups and religious things, right? But governments aren't. But drug users are still attacked, stigmatized, jailed, harassed by police in a very real way. And there's a lot of hate for drug users too. I mean, when I go on the internet, there's definitely a lot of people that like think if you take heroin, you deserve to die, and you've made a choice, and you're better off if you're just gone or whatever. And really hateful kind of stuff. But I think that the recognition that it's not working, we're over incarcerating people, and I think just a general change in our culture at the time is what's driving it forward. But it's going to be a long, slow process. And civil disobedience is a big part of that process, and of challenging the law directly. And I think really is helpful in accelerating change and making things happen.
So that's what we need, is we need more people fighting. Like we need more people who believe in this, not just marching down the street high, but actually going to their government and going and, setting up rallies and like actually becoming.
I think we need more dispensaries. I think people should go, hey, Dana's been doing this for a year. He didn't get busted. There's a couple of other mushroom shops in Vancouver. Let's open more. Like, just don't open right next door to me. But otherwise, like, the more the better, right? And I think that as long as people are doing it responsibly, there should be more across the country. And, talking to government people and organizing and being active is good. But starting a business of this kind can be really effective. And if you can then take your profits and redirect those back into subsidizing the kind of activism that maybe doesn't fund itself, that to me is a wonderful combination. It worked really well with cannabis dispensaries, especially the earlier ones. As you get going, more people are into it just because they see an opportunity. And really, it should just be a business like any other, right? You shouldn't really have to be an activist, but under the current conditions and of incarceration, people are still going to jail and there's still a lot of issues. I think it's morally responsible on you, if you're going to have a business like this, to put money back to that battle, right? And to make it part of that fight. But having a business where you can generate revenue and where you can give people access to, like, this is about people having access to these substances. That's really what this fight is over. And so being able to give that access to people in a safe and transparent way where they know what they're getting, whether you're accountable to your community, you're trying to do things, as transparently and legally as possible in the context, that I think is extremely effective. And if we can get, when we have hundreds of shops across the country selling psychedelics and microdoses and safe places where you can go and have a psychedelic experience, that will be what then leads to the criminalization of psychedelics ending.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have any message you want to give out before we go?
Yeah, just that this is a big issue and there's still a lot of work to do. I've been working on this for like 30 years, right? And there's a lot more. But if you're watching this and you want to get involved, consider opening a dispensary in your town. It can be delivery. It doesn't have to be a storefront. It can be mail order. It can be away, but run it responsibly and be aware of what you're doing and be safe about it. But the way to end the war on psychedelics is to make them more widely available, and ultimately, I think that's how it goes for all these things. We need harm reduction, we need safe supply, and they're not going to give it to us. We have to do it ourselves.
That's very well said. And I'm going to tell for any people that are walking down the street of Vancouver, smoking a doobie with their friend, and not getting sweated. It's partly because of this man right here. Back in the day, if you were walking down the street with a joint, you'd get fined. Remember? Those were the days. And because of this gentleman right here, Mr. Dana Larsen, you're able to have that freedom. So make sure you come down here to the Coca Leaf Cafe, grab yourself a coffee, look around the shop here, and if you're lucky, you might be able to see this guy roaming around. Thanks for the interview, buddy.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Awesome.